The title of this book, The Spiritual Man. The title of this book, The Spiritual Man. It is written by our beloved brother, Watchman Nee. We are now in Great Part 3, Chapter 2 of this Great Part 3, Chapter 2, The Experience of Soulish Believer. The Experience of Soulish Believer. Chapter 2, Subpart 3. Chapter 2, Subpart 3. They frequently bemoan their life, shedding many tears of self-pity. These individuals love literature and are simply ravished by its beauty. They also enjoy hymning a few lyric poems, for this gives them a transcendent feeling. They visit mountain, lake, and stream since these bring them closer to nature. Upon seeing the declining course of this world, they begin to entertain thought of leading a detached existence. How ascendant, how pure they are, not like other believers who seem to be so materialistic, so pedestrian, so immersed. These Christians deem themselves more spiritual, not recognizing how incredibly soulish they actually are. Such carnality presents the greatest obstacle to their entering the holy spiritual realm because they are governed so completely by their emotion. Of greatest hazard to them are an awareness of their dangerous position and an utter self-content. Carnal believers may belong on so-called spiritual knowledge but usually are short on experience. Hence, they condemn others but do not correct themselves. When they hear the teaching of the dividing of soul and spirit, their natural mind smoothly assimilated it. But what happened then? They set about discerning and dissecting the soulish thought and act not in their own life but in those of others. Their acquisition of knowledge has merely propelled them to judge someone else and not to help themselves. This propensity to criticize is a common practice amongst the soulish. They have the soulical capacity to receive knowledge but lack the spiritual capacity to be humble. In their association with people, they leave one with the impression of being cold and hard. Their dealing with others possess a certain stiffness about it. In like spiritual believer, the outward man has not been broken and they are therefore not easy to approach or to accompany. Christians who thrive on the soul life are very proud. This is because they make self the center. However much they may try to give the glory to God and acknowledge any merit as of God's grace, carnal believers have their mind set upon self. Whether accounting their life good or bad, their thoughts revolve around themselves. They have not yet lost themselves in God. These feel greatly hurt if they are led aside either in work or in the judgment of others. They cannot bear to be misunderstood or criticized because they, like their most spiritual brethren, still have not learned to accept gladly God's ordering, whether resulting in sleep or in rejection. Unwillingly are they to appear inferior, as being despised, even after they have received grace to know the actual state of their natural life as much corrupt, and even after they may have humbled themselves before God, counting their life to be the worst in the world, these nevertheless ironically end up regarding themselves more humble than the rest. They boast in their humility. Pride is deeply bred in the bones. The work of soulish believer. The work of soulish believer. The soulish are second to none in the matter of work. They are most active, zealous, and willing, but they do not labor because they have received God's order. They labor instead because they have zeal and capacity so to do. They believe doing God's work. They believe doing God's work is good enough. In a word, that only doing the labor of God's appointment is truly commendable. These individuals have neither the heart to trust nor the time to wait. They never sincerely seek the will of God. On the contrary, they labor according to their idea with a mind teeming with shame and plan. Because they diligently work, these Christians fall into the error of looking upon themselves as far more advanced than their lesser brethren. Who can deny, however, that with God's grace, the latter can easily be more spiritual than the former? The labor of soulish believer chiefly depends upon feeling. They take to work only when they feel up to it. And if this congenial feeling ceases while working, they will quit automatically. They can witness to people for hours on end without weariness, or end without weariness of their experience within their heart, a burning and unshakable joyful feeling. But if they sustain a coldness or dryness within, they will scarcely speak or not even speak at all. In the face of the greatest need, as say before a deathbed situation, with tingling warm, they can run 1,000 miles. Without it, they will not move a teeny step. They cannot endure their feeling to the extent of speaking when stomach is empty, is a Samaritan. They cannot endure their feelings to the extent of speaking when stomach is empty to a Samaritan woman, or talking with eyes as rosy to a Nicodemus. Carnal Christians crave work, yet in many labor they are unable to maintain calm in their spirit. They cannot fulfill God's order quietly as can the spiritual believer. Much work disturbs them. Outward confusion causes inner unrest. Their hearts are governed by outward matter. Being distracted with much serving, and God, Luke chapter 10 verse 14, is the characteristic of the work of any soulish believer. Carnal Christians are readily discouraged in their exertion. They lack that quiet confidence which trusts God for His work. Regulated as they are by their internal sensation and external environment, they cannot appreciate the law of faith. Upon feeling that they have failed, through not necessarily true, they give up They fail when the surroundings appear dark and inviting to them. They have not yet entered into the rest of God. Lacking in farsightedness, believers who trust in the soul easily become discouraged. Only what is immediately ahead can they see. Momentary victory beget them joy. Temporary defeat render them sad. They have not discovered how to see on the end of a matter through the eyes of faith. They yearn for an immediate success as comfort for their heart. Failure to achieve it rendered them unable to press on unworldly and to trust God in continual darkness. The soulish are expert at finding fault, although they are not necessarily stronger themselves. Quick are the soulish to criticize, and slow are they to forgive. When they investigate and correct the shortcoming in order, they exclude a kind of self-sufficient and superior attitude. Their way in sometimes helping people is correct and legal, but their motivation is not always right. The tendency to be hasty often stamp those who follow their soul. They cannot wait on God. Whatever is done hurriedly, precipitously, impetuously. They act from impulse rather than from principle. Even in God's work, these Christians are so propelled by their zeal and passion that they simply cannot stay for God to make clear His will and way. The mind of the carnal is occupied wholly with their endeavor. They ponder and plan, plot and predict. At times they presage a bright future. Minds are beside themselves with joy. At other moments they fall, glimpse darkness, and immediately become haunted by intolerable misery. Do they thereby think of their Lord? No, they think more of their labor. To them, working for the Lord is of supreme importance, but often they forget the Lord who gives work. The Lord's work becomes the center. The Lord of work resided to the background. Foolish person lacking in spiritual insight are guided by sudden thought which flash through the mind. Their word and work are therefore often inappropriate. They speak in the first place not because need summoned them to do so, but solely because they surmise they ought to be such in need. And then they may approach when sympathy is called for, comfort when warning is in order. All these are due to their deficiency in spiritual discernment. They place too much reliance upon their limited and limiting thought, and even after their words have proved to be unprofitable, they still refuse to accept the verdict. Because he possesses ocean or plant and mountain of opinion, it is extremely trying to work with a carnal Christian. Whatever he deems to be good must be accepted as good by others. The essential condition for working with him is perfect agreement to his idea or interpretation. The slightest interpretation is equated as a deep involvement in what he considered to be the faith once delivered to the saint. Any different opinion which is manifested, he positively cannot tolerate. Although the soulish believer knew he should not hold on to opinion, he makes sure that whenever an opinion needs to die, it is certainly not going to be his. Sectarianism, he will admit, is inscriptural, but it is never his particular sect which must die.